Get ready to listen, learn, and earn CE hours. This podcast features content from an accredited CE activity provided by Calibri Healthcare. Visit elitelearning.com/podcasts for accreditation and disclosure statements and instructions on how you may be able to earn CE credits.
Well, and how often have you tried to achieve that perfection or thought that you needed to be perfect and you didn't go for something because you were too afraid you couldn't be perfect? You miss out on that journey. And even if it is something that's filled with mistakes, you really miss out on some important learning along the way.
Welcome to an informative podcast series, Building Your Credibility and Team Skills. And with me today are Bridget Sarikas and Kathy Scott. I'll be your host, Leanna McGuire. And today we're going to talk about why positive reframing is critical in healthcare leadership. Welcome.
Good to be here.
Glad you're here. Okay, let's talk about this positive reframing. What do we mean by that?
Oh, well, reframing is really looking at something in a different way, through a different set of lenses. And it's surprising what you can see when you put on that different set of lenses. And in the case of leadership, we're often trying to find a more positive approach to dealing with difficult issues. So we call that reframing, and it can have a real significant impact on how you move forward and how you present issues to your team and how they perceive them.
Okay. Yeah, and I think in today's world, it's really important to have that reframing because as we've seen, so much has changed. And without that, new perspective, you can just get stuck in the old way. So I think reframing is really important.
And I think it actually really applies to today's topic that we're going to talk about in this first segment, which is pursuing excellence and not perfection. Why do we not want to pursue perfection?
Oh, for so many reasons. So
many.
Yeah. First of all, perfection isn't really achievable, even though we continue to try. And it's really an unhealthy approach to living and learning, quite frankly, because you're trying to achieve something that is usually expectations of others. And in the process, you really get lost and you kind of pull in and work out of a fear mode versus a learning. Let's see what we can learn here and how we can make this better. Right. It's so much more important to pursue what we call excellence, which is always improving what we're doing and learning from our mistakes, because we will all make them, and continue to learn and grow and develop. So perfection just binds us all up.
Yeah, I like to think of that as we're a work in progress. And Kathy and I talk about that a lot, but you're definitely a work in progress. And if you view yourself that way and get out of that perfection mindset, it's really helpful because as you're really trying to achieve that perfection, you can get exhausted and you may never achieve it, but you're going to kill yourself trying. So there's a healthier way to look at yourself and how you can, achieve success.
So talk to us about how excellence is achievable without perfection.
Well, it's really about learning. I mean, that is the bottom line here. When you're in a perfectionist mindset, you're trying to avoid making mistakes and failures. And when you're focused so much on that, it's very difficult to actually see what's in front of you and continue to improve it. So it limits your achievements. And it's this pursuing perfection is really more about desiring to look good rather than to learn and move forward. And so you're always playing to someone else and looking at them for the feedback that you look good. And in a day of social media, that's pretty tough stuff.
Yeah, that's awful.
Yeah.
Well, and how often have you tried to achieve that perfection or thought that you needed to be perfect, and you didn't go for something because you were too afraid you couldn't be perfect. You miss out on that journey. And even if it is something that's filled with mistakes, you really miss out on some important learning along the way.
That's a really good point. I think we do grow from personal experience. I think we've all had conversations about this where personal growth comes from being willing to fail, right? And if you're not, then those chances, you're just not going to take them. How does it hold us back as leaders?
Well, I think it creates an environment for our teams where they think if we are striving for perfection, they need to be perfect. And so they're going to be careful. They're working out of fear. And so they're unable to develop their skill sets and even be honest about what's going on. As a leader, everything gets filtered as it comes up to us. And if you're in that perfectionist mindset, you can just double the number of filters because they're only going to tell you what they think you need or want to hear, and they're going to hold back. And that just brings everyone down.
Wow, good
And
point.
I think the beauty of a leader showing the imperfect side, or that ability that it's okay that you've made a mistake, that we can pivot, we can adapt to something, or reframe, whichever one you want to, whichever word you want to use. I think that is a beautiful thing because it makes you human, and that humanness is what sometimes is missing in that quest for perfection.
So perfection kind of speaks to vulnerability or not being willing to go there in a way, right?
Absolutely. And when you can watch a room and kind of heads down, all right, I don't want to look stupid here, so I'm not going to speak up. And when that happens, you know that the group is really stifled and not moving forward, and they're not going to perform at their highest level. They're just simply not. So it's moving out of that perfectionism into what we call a learning mindset. If you approach your day with, what can I learn from this and how can I make this better throughout the day? It's a completely different approach to your work. And this applies at home too. So, what
Right.
can I pay attention to and learn from and do differently? Because this is a journey and it's also a choice. And so, as leaders, especially, we want to role model those behaviors for others so that they can and will be more comfortable doing the same.
Nice.
And I think it's so important along the way to have a bit of fun. I mean, think about at home on a journey, you're going to cook this amazing dinner, it's going to be perfect, and then it's not, right? And you have to have the ability to laugh that off and say, that's okay. And I have a lot of experience there because I'm not a great cook, but I'll give it my darndest try. I'll pursue that excellence. But if it doesn't get there, that's okay.
Yeah, and I know you said to act stupid, but being able to laugh at yourself, I think, is a real quality in a person and in a leader, for sure.
Oh,
100%.
it's so valuable. It just
Yeah.
is. And as
Yeah.
Bridget said earlier, just demonstrating your humanness puts other people at ease. Because, I mean, we spend way too much time at work to start with or on work activities. So it's really important to not just be focused on outcomes. I got to get to that outcome, but also to be focused on that process, the journey to get there, which involves, learning, relationships, enjoying yourself, sharing your own learnings from your own failures or stupid moves, and we all have them. It just goes a long way.
Good point. Now, it can delay outcomes too, perfection, right? I mean, we're in a fast paced environment where when someone asks for something, they usually want it yesterday, is the case, right? So perfectionism can delay that whole process and actually make you look worse than what your intent was in the beginning because you're not responsive enough or the outcomes aren't coming fast enough. Is that correct?
That's a really good point. It can. And many times, and you have to ask yourself the question, is 80% good enough? In healthcare, we do small tests of change. This is kind of what we're talking about here. So think of the PDSA cycle: plan, do, study, act. So I'm going to plan it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to study it. Oops, didn't like that, but this part was good. And now I'm going to adapt, as I move forward. So many times 80% is good enough. Get it in there, then get people's thoughts on it, test it, and then continue to tweak it and improve it as you go. That's a pursuit of excellence.
Love it.
Yeah,
Love it.
I think that's so important. But that 80-20 rule, or whatever your rule might be, is hard to get to. So you have to have that mindset that allows you to get there, and you have to have leaders that allow you to do that as well. Because quite often when you are seeking that perfection and you are on that timeline, sometimes you miss an opportunity to discover something else that could actually enhance whatever that outcome is, because you've been too focused, you've been too narrow-minded. So you miss something really important.
Yeah, good point. That's an excellent point. There's a bit of a fine balance, though, as well, I think. I worked for a leader who said that perfectionism was the enemy of good. But he was also quoted as saying, "We're taking off without landing gear." And that would give, he was a bit of a crazy maker, because everybody'd be in panic mode thinking, well, we should have at least something in place, like something in case we have to land. And it would kind of drive you crazy. So he was in the good to excellence versus the excellence to perfection. But somewhere in the middle, there's a bit of a balance. Is that right?
Well, I think so, and it also depends on what you're working on. So if I'm on the OR table, I would like your mindset to be perfection. When you're operating on my body. But that's different. That's different from designing a new system, a new care delivery model where you've got to figure it out. So again, it depends on what the activities are and the intended outcomes. But it's also connecting the dots for people. Here's where we're going. This is the outcome, and giving people permission to travel different pathways to get there. But people need to be clear on the destination and on what the kind of the bumpers are for the work that you're doing. So that's a leader's job. You say, here's the frame we're working in. Don't go outside of these boundaries. And here's where we want to go. And do your best. Let's bring some ideas forward. Let's try some new ways and see what happens. This is about learning.
Love that.
Yeah, I think one of the important things too is it's really important as a leader to ask questions, to check in throughout that process. You may have given them those boundaries, but that doesn't mean just let them go and never check in, because as a leader, the questions that you ask can really help the team move either in a different direction. Maybe they have never thought about something that you're going to bring up, but the questions are really important to ask.
Advice to those who really have a hard time letting go of perfection. They may be listening to this right now and nodding and knowing that all of this makes sense and it's all very valuable, and don't I wish I could be that way. But are there some tips and tricks to get there?
That's a great question.
For example, can they find a buddy or someone who can call them on it when they're going too far in the perfection direction? Perfection direction. There you go. There's one for you.
That's a good one. That's a t-shirt. I like it. I think that's a t-shirt.
It is. It is.
Would that be helpful? Think it takes a lot of work with your head to move out of perfection mode. Many of us hear those little voices in our head that might be mom, dad, or somebody in our past. And so I think really working through that with a friend or a colleague to say, all right, these are my tendencies. I realize this is getting in the way, and I'm going to try some new approaches. I mean, if you've been a perfectionist and have been working out of that model, it's helpful to say to people, I realize this isn't healthy. This is not going to take us where we need to go. And so I'm working on this personally, and here's why. And feel free to call me on my behavior. I mean, leadership is a set of skills that need to be practiced, and this is really one of those. And talking about it is a good starting point.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I think start small, right? I mean, you don't have to be on this, major project and decide that, you're not going for perfection. You're going to just scale it back. Start small because you need to be able to recalibrate yourself, and someone can help you with that as well. So you can say, really, is this good enough? What do you think? But again, starting small, I think, is really critical.
Yes, absolutely. And what about, I guess it would be important to pay attention to thought process, like when you hear yourself say, this isn't good enough, or when you hear yourself say, it's not pretty enough. That would help as well. I'm curious as to whether or not you feel that perfectionism is related in any way to micromanaging.
Oh, yes. And who doesn't love to be micromanaged?
Right? Yeah.
So that
It's the
right
best
there,
feeling ever.
that right there is evidence that leading through a perfectionist mindset, or a fixed mindset, as it's also called, is not a good way to go. And oftentimes that fixed mindset comes out of thinking, I'm born with this set of skills and talents. I'm born with this with this intelligence level, and this is who I am. And it's important to move out of that to, no, I have not achieved my potential. This is a growth journey, and to expect that from your team as well. They're growing, they're learning, and so get out of that fixed mindset and into, we're on this journey together, and we are going to continuously improve together by learning from the things we do well and the things that we don't do well.
Excellent.
I think it's really important because individuals quite often have had either parents or someone in their lives who have encouraged that perfectionist mindset. So it's not easy to let go of. It has been with you for so long. And starting, like I said, starting small is always important because and starting, maybe it's something as easy as, I want to learn this skill. I know I'm not going to be great at it right away, but it's okay. And when you start doing something like that and realize, that I'm not really great at that, but that was okay. I took a chance. I tried something new. Look at it that way. Finding new experiences that don't have to be perfect, but they can be fun.
Fantastic. I'm hearing a lot of reframing in here throughout this whole discussion. Number one, reframing perfection and to think about excellence, reframing vulnerability to think of it as a strength instead of a weakness, which it is. And all of these things, it's all about mindset from what I'm hearing, correct?
It really is, and I was just thinking of some of my kids. I was watching in our family, and we had a new game, and I have one child who is really super smart, and everybody tells him he's smart all the time, and I have another one who isn't super smart and doesn't get that kind of feedback. The super smart guy, didn't want to play the game because it was something he knew he wouldn't be good at. And the other one said, let's give it a shot. Let's try it. And so it was such a great picture of what we're talking about. That's how perfectionism holds you back, because he didn't want to try it at all. And so we're trying to get past that with reframing to, it's a game. You're going to learn something from this. And reframing it, and then celebrating whatever it is you learned from it. Yes.
Perfect.
And having leaders that help you get that, get there that way, that can be, gosh, that's a gold mine. We often say that's a beautiful thing. Well, that is a beautiful thing.
Yes, I'd say. What a great story to illustrate this whole discussion. I love that. It's been great talking to you about this. I've loved it. And again, we're talking about building your credibility and team skills. And we've just discussed how positive reframing is critical in healthcare leadership. We're going to get together again, and we're going to talk about practicing kindness before rightness with both Bridget Sarikas and Kathy Scott. So tune into our next episode. This is Leanna McGuire for Elite Learning by Colibri Healthcare.
This podcast featured content from an accredited CE activity provided by Colibri Healthcare. Visit elitelearning.com/podcasts for accreditation and disclosure statements and instructions on how you may be able to earn CE credits. Take your learning to the next level by subscribing to more podcasts on compelling healthcare topics.